Welcome to this explainer. We often think of romance as this mystical, unexplainable force, right? Like a spark of destiny. And that's especially true today in this crazy era of endless swiping and algorithmic matchmaking. The reasons we feel a sudden magnetic pull toward one dating profile and absolutely nothing for the next can feel like a total mystery. But what if we could actually break that magic down into observable psychological components? Well, today, we're going to do exactly that. We're pulling from decades of psychological research to uncover the actual formula behind why we fall for the people we do. And as you'll see, the science of love might actually be way more interesting than the magic.
Here is a quick look at our agenda for today. We're breaking our equation down into 4 parts: proximity and similarity, the halo effect, misattribution of arousal, and finally, the reward theory.
Let's jump into part 1, proximity and similarity. This is really the foundation of everything.
Okay, so before any romantic sparks can fly, the stage has to be set. And that stage is built purely on proximity and similarity. Proposed by Leon Festinger and his colleagues way back in 1950, the proximity effect basically tells us that physical and psychological closeness directly increases interpersonal liking. Now, back then, that meant simply sitting next to someone in history class or living in the same college dorm, which forced familiarity. But think about how this applies to modern dating apps. It's literally the exact same psychology. The very first filter you set on any app is your location radius. You set it to 5 miles, maybe 10 miles. Because despite all our advanced digital technology, psychological closeness still relies heavily on geographic availability. Basically, if you don't have any negative pre-existing opinions about a person, this mere exposure naturally breeds comfort, perceives similarity, and eventually attraction. It is the ultimate right place, right time scientific principle.
But hey, it's not just about physical closeness. It's also about perceived psychological closeness. Researchers at Boston University recently looked into this similarity attraction effect. According to researcher Charles Chu, we tend to embrace a feeling of fundamental similarity based on just 1 or 2 shared interests. Human minds are incredibly complex, so we use our own sense of self as a cognitive shortcut to fill in the blanks about the other person. To put that into perspective, imagine you're swiping on a dating app and you see your favorite super obscure indie movie listed on someone's profile. Instantly you feel a bond, right? Your brain automatically jumps to the conclusion that if they like that specific movie, well, they must share your core essence, your values, maybe even your entire political and social worldview. It's an incredibly powerful cognitive shortcut that rockets us straight toward attraction.
Moving right along to part 2, the halo effect, how we judge physical presence.
So once we're near someone and we feel that initial ping of familiarity, how does our brain actually judge their physical presence? That brings us to our second variable. The halo effect is a famous cognitive bias first identified by Edward Thorndike in 1920. It's often called the "what is beautiful is good" principle. This bias literally tricks our brains into thinking that if someone is physically attractive, they must inherently possess a whole suite of other amazing positive traits. Take faces, for example. If someone has a highly symmetrical face, our brain subconsciously assumes they're a better leader, they're more competent, and they're more trustworthy. This is exactly why a single face photo on a dating app can prompt an immediate right swipe. Our brain instantly fills in a complete, and honestly often completely false, positive personality profile based on nothing more than a nice jawline or a great smile.
Now, for decades, we've known this applies to faces. But a really fascinating recent study featured in Personality Science wanted to know if this halo effect applies exclusively to bodies without any facial cues at all. To test this, researchers used 3D body scans of over 150 German men. These scans were totally stripped of all identifying features, no heads, isolating just the body itself. They then had observers rate these faceless bodies on attractiveness, health, prosociality, and physical dominance.
The researchers wanted to test this across cultures, using observers from an individualistic culture, Germany, and a collectivistic culture, Japan. The results were incredibly consistent across the board, proving that the halo effect is deeply rooted in a universal evolutionary drive to find a healthy mate. Observers from both cultures exhibited strong attractiveness halo effects. They universally saw attractive bodies as healthier and more pro-social. But there were some really fascinating cultural nuances in the flavor of that halo. German observers linked physical dominance much more closely to attractiveness than the Japanese observers did. So this suggests that while the biological drive is universal, our specific cultural values, like valuing individual physical dominance versus valuing harmonious social relationships, they tweak exactly how we perceive physical beauty.
All right, part 3, misattribution of arousal. This is where your body gets its signals completely crossed.
Okay, so we have the foundation of proximity, and we have the physical bias of the halo effect. Now for the plot twist. What happens when your body confuses its own signals? It sounds like a totally bizarre question, but can fear actually make someone more attractive to you? Spoiler alert, taking a first date on a terrifying roller coaster or to a slasher film might actually be a highly effective, scientifically sound dating strategy. To understand why, we have to look at one of the most famous psychological experiments ever conducted, set on the swaying 450-foot-high Capilano Suspension Bridge in British Columbia.
Back in 1974, psychologists Donald Dutton and Arthur Aaron set up this brilliant experiment. They positioned a highly attractive female researcher on two different bridges to survey passing men. One was the terrifying suspension bridge, which naturally induced fear, elevated heart rates, shortness of breath, the whole shebang. The other was a low, sturdy, completely safe bridge. After a brief survey, the researcher gave the men her phone number. And if you look at the outcome, the men who met her on the scary suspension bridge were significantly more likely to call her later. Why? Because of the misattribution of arousal. Their bodies were flooded with fear-induced adrenaline, but because an attractive person was right in front of them, their brains completely mislabeled that physiological response. Their brains essentially concluded, my palms are sweating, my heart is pounding, and I feel like I might fall, so I must be intensely romantically aroused by the person standing in front of me. It's crazy, right?
Finally, part 4, the reward theory. Let's talk about the engine of attraction.
So we have proximity, putting us in the same room, physical biases amplifying attraction, and physiological arousal acting as an unpredictable spark. But what is the actual engine that keeps the attraction going day after day? Enter the reward theory of attraction, and its close cousin, the social exchange theory. According to this framework, we treat relationships almost like an economic transaction. I know it sounds a bit cold, but our brains are constantly running a subconscious cost-benefit analysis on everyone we meet. We seek to maximize rewards, things like love, social status, validation, and emotional support, while minimizing costs, like conflict, time, and stress. As long as the interpersonal benefits outweigh the costs, the attraction thrives.
Early interpersonal attraction research cleanly grouped these rewards into 5 main predictors, which include similarity, proximity, and social influences. But let's look closely at that fourth one, admirable characteristics. This is where the psychology of attraction gets really fascinating, especially when we look at the paradoxical appeal of what psychologists call dark traits. You might wonder why people initially fall so hard for toxic partners or the classic bad boy. Well, traits from the dark triad, which include narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism, can actually mimic admirable characteristics perfectly in the short term. They present as supreme confidence, undeniable charm, and bold assertiveness. The brain initially logs these dark traits as highly rewarding social characteristics. It's essentially a psychological sleight of hand that explains exactly why toxic traits can be intensely attractive before the illusion eventually fades.
Another massive predictor on that list is simply being liked. This is known as the reciprocity of liking. If someone smiles at you or seems genuinely interested, you read that as a profound signal of acceptance. That person instantly becomes safer and more rewarding to approach. Think about modern digital romance again. This is the exact psychological mechanism behind why it feels so incredibly good to get a match notification on your phone. Knowing they swiped right on you first drops your guard and instantly makes them infinitely more attractive to you, creating a rapid feedback loop of mutual interest.
Later on, researchers evolved this reward theory into what is called the self-expansion model. They suggested that the ultimate reward isn't just a pat on the back. It is a partner who actively helps us grow. According to this model, we are highly motivated to expand our physical influence, our cognitive complexity, and our social identity. You don't just want someone who likes the exact same bands as you. You want someone who introduces you to a completely new genre of music, teaches you how to cook a new cuisine, or fundamentally challenges your perspectives. We literally want to incorporate the other person's experiences into our own concept of self.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we kind of have to step back, look at our initial equation, and ask a rather philosophical question. If we are drawn to geographic proximity, biased by cultural definitions of beauty, driven by physical arousal, and seeking to expand our own sense of self, is attraction ultimately just a reflection of ourselves?
Remember that Boston University study we discussed earlier? It gives us a stark reminder of this. Our search for a partner is heavily biased by our own self-essentialist reasoning. We are profoundly drawn to people who we believe share our deep, underlying essence. This makes us, in many ways, drawn to mirrors of our own minds. We look for someone who reflects our core values back at us, essentially validating our own existence.
So, while love and romance might feel like absolute magic in the moment, as this explainer illustrates, it's actually deeply rooted in a predictable biological and psychological formula. You need the digital or physical proximity to spark familiarity. You need the halo biases to quickly evaluate potential based on faces and bodies. You need the physiological arousal to kickstart the emotion, even if your brain is just totally confused by a swaying bridge. And you need the social rewards, whether that's mutual liking, self-expansion, or the temporary thrill of a dark trait to build a lasting bond.
It's a complex, incredibly beautiful equation that happens entirely subconsciously every single day. But now that you know the variables, I want to leave you with this. Next time you feel that sudden, undeniable spark with a stranger, ask yourself, is it really destiny? Or is it just a geographic algorithm, a racing heart, and your brain desperately looking for a psychological reward? Honestly, sometimes the actual science of love is even more fascinating than the magic. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I hope this helps you decode your own human experiences.